December 19th, 1944, 11:30 p.m., Verdun, France. The stone walls of the underground headquarters sweat with cold. Cigarette smoke hangs low, trapped beneath the ceiling like a stubborn fog. Boots scrape against concrete as aides shift their weight, hands shoved deep into pockets, breath visible even indoors. Outside, the Ardennes winter is tightening its grip. -10 degrees, snow crusted hard as iron, wind slicing through pine forests and men alike. Inside this bunker, the war is unraveling. Maps are spread across a long table, their clean lines now scarred by grease pencil slashes and frantic annotations. Red arrows, German, punch westward where no red arrows should be. Entire Allied divisions are missing, their last reported positions circled with question marks. Bastogne, St. Vith, Houffalize, names that were footnotes a week ago now dominate the room like open wounds. At the center stands General Dwight D. Eisenhower, Supreme Commander of Allied forces in Europe. His face is drawn, the famous calm strained thin by exhaustion. He hasn't slept properly in days. None of them has. The German counteroffensive, Wacht am Rhein, has detonated through the Ardennes with a violence no one in this room fully anticipated. Communications are fractured, roads are jammed with refugees, wrecks, and retreating units. The weather, low clouds, snowstorms, has grounded Allied air power, the one advantage the Germans cannot match. And now, Bastogne, the critical road junction, is surrounded. The 101st Airborne is cut off. If Bastogne falls, the German spearheads can roll west, splitting the Allied armies clean in two. You can almost feel the weight of it pressing down on the room. Not panic yet, but something colder, the realization that the margin for error is gone. Eisenhower looks around the table. Omar Bradley, Courtney Hodges, Montgomery's representatives, and George S. Patton, Jr., commander of the 3rd U.S. Army, standing stiff-backed, helmet liner tucked under one arm, eyes sharp, unreadable. For days now, Eisenhower has been absorbing bad news in relentless waves. German armor where there should be none. American units were overrun or bypassed, intelligence failures laid bare. This is the nightmare scenario every Allied planner feared but hoped would never come. And now Eisenhower asks the question that hangs over everything. "Gentlemen," he says, voice steady but low, "what can we do?" There is a pause. A long one. Bradley speaks first, outlining defensive measures, stabilizing lines, and buying time. Hodges nods, grim. Montgomery's plan, still forming, leans toward consolidation in the north. Sensible, careful, necessary. But Eisenhower's eyes drift back to Patton. Patton has been quiet, too quiet for a man famous for filling rooms with his presence. He's been listening, calculating, running numbers behind his eyes. He knows something the others don't, or rather, he's ready for something the others are only now confronting. Eisenhower turns to him. "George," he says, voice steady but low, "what about you?" Patton doesn't hesitate. He steps forward, boots echoing once on the concrete floor, and points at the map. Not south, where his 3rd Army is currently driving east toward the Saar, but north, toward the chaos, toward Bastogne. "I can attack," Patton says. Not loudly, not theatrically. Calm. Certain. The room is still.
Eisenhower looks at him, eyebrow lifting slightly. "When?" Patton doesn't blink. "With 3 divisions, in 48 hours. You can almost hear the air leave the bunker. 48 hours, in this weather, on these roads, with an army oriented entirely the wrong direction, against German forces at the height of their offensive power. To anyone else it would sound like bravado, the kind of reckless confidence Patton is famous for, the kind that makes cautious men nervous and careful planners bristle. But Eisenhower doesn't dismiss it. He studies Patton's face, not the words, the manner, the lack of qualifiers, the absence of mental math, This isn't a man improvising under pressure. This is a man reporting a fact. And in that instant, Eisenhower realizes something profound. Patton isn't reacting to the crisis. He anticipated it. Days earlier, before the Germans even broke through, Patton had ordered his staff to plan for exactly this scenario: a sudden pivot north, fuel quietly stockpiled, routes through Luxembourg and southern Belgium were reconnoitered in advance, contingency orders drafted, sealed, and ready. Even the traffic control plans, military police at key junctions, schedules for division movements had already been thought through. While others hoped the Ardennes would hold, Patton assumed it wouldn't. That's the realization hitting Eisenhower now. Not just that relief for Bastogne might be possible, but that the Allies still possess a commander who can move faster than chaos, faster than the enemy. Eisenhower leans over the map, finger tracing Patton's proposed axis of advance. It's audacious, it's dangerous, it's exactly what the Germans won't expect. If Patton can pull this off, if he can wheel an entire army 90 degrees in the dead of winter and strike north like a hammer, then the initiative doesn't just return to the Allies, it snaps back. But none of that has happened yet. Right now, all Eisenhower has is a sentence: "I can attack," and a decision to make. Because if Patton is wrong, the consequences will be catastrophic. An exposed Third Army, wasted fuel and time, Bastogne lost. The Ardennes front was shattered beyond repair. Eisenhower straightens, the weight of command settling squarely on his shoulders. This is what Supreme Command means, choosing which risks are survivable and which are fatal. He looks at Patton again. "George," Eisenhower says slowly, "you're sure?" Patton nods once. "Yes, sir." No elaboration, no justification, just certainty. Outside, the snow keeps falling. German tanks grind forward through frozen valleys. In Bastogne, paratroopers are digging foxholes into ground too hard to break, listening to the distant rumble of enemy engines closing in. Time is bleeding away.
Eisenhower gives the order. And as the men in the bunker begin to move, phones ringing, staff officers rushing for doors, Eisenhower understands something else, something deeper than strategy. This war will not be won by reacting. It will be won by men who prepare for disaster before it announces itself. And George Patton has already begun. December 20th, 1944, 3 a.m., somewhere on the road to Luxembourg. The headlights are hooded, thin slits of yellow cutting through the darkness. Snow squeaks under tires and boots alike, a sound so sharp it feels like it might shatter the silence. Columns of trucks crawl forward nose to tail, engines muttering, exhaust freezing into white plumes that hang in the air like ghosts. The Third Army is turning. Orders that were still sealed envelopes hours ago are now tearing open across command posts from Nancy to Metz. Staff officers read them twice, then a third time as the meaning settles in. A full operational pivot, 90 degrees, north, immediately. No debates, no requests for clarification. This is Patton's army. When the order comes, it moves. Division commanders snap awake to ringing field phones. Tank crews are hauled from half-frozen sleep. Infantrymen stomp numb feet and curse as they shoulder packs crusted with ice. Military police race ahead, setting up traffic control points on crossroads that in daylight barely count as roads. Engineers check bridges already sagging under snow and weight. Quartermasters start counting fuel like gold coins. And somehow, against logic, against weather, against the chaos choking every other Allied formation, it works. Patton rides forward in his command car, standing upright despite the cold, eyes fixed on the dark road ahead. He's wearing his ivory-handled pistols, polished even now, a small defiance against the filth and frost. To outsiders, it looks like theater. To his men, it's a signal.
The man in charge is already there. What Eisenhower understood in Verdun is becoming visible on the roads of France. This movement didn't begin tonight. The routes have been studied, the choke points are anticipated, even the likely traffic jams, inevitable when thousands of vehicles converge in winter darkness, have solutions already in motion. At every bottleneck, an officer seems to be waiting. Patton's staff had planned this pivot weeks ago, during quiet evenings when other headquarters focused on the Saar offensive. They asked an uncomfortable question: what if the Germans hit us where we least expect it? And instead of dismissing it, they built a response. Now that preparation is paying dividends in minutes and miles. Snowstorms hammer the columns, reducing visibility to nothing. Men navigate by memory, by map, by the red glow of a taillight ahead. Vehicles slide into ditches and are hauled out by sheer manpower. When roads vanish under drifts, tanks lead, crushing paths open for trucks behind them. There is no sense of improvisation here, only momentum. Patton reaches a forward command post as dawn threatens the horizon, a pale gray light barely piercing the cloud cover. He gathers his corps commanders, Middleton, Eddy, Milliken, men as tired as they are determined. The situation is grim. Bastogne is still surrounded. German armor is probing westward. Time is measured in hours. Patton doesn't waste words. "Gentlemen," he says, stabbing at the map, "we're going to Bastogne. We're going to hit them hard, and we're going to do it now." There is no talk of if.
Only when. The plan unfolds with brutal clarity. The Third Corps will lead the drive, pushing north through Luxembourg. Tanks first, infantry close behind, artillery leapfrogging forward as fast as roads allow. Air support is minimal, weather still grounded, but Patton doesn't wait for perfect conditions. He never has. Speed is the weapon. Every mile gained denies the Germans time to consolidate. Every hour shaved off the schedule tightens the noose around their extended supply lines. This isn't just about rescuing Bastogne. It's about seizing the initiative in the middle of the enemy's grand gamble. And Eisenhower knows it. Back at Supreme Headquarters, reports begin filtering in. Third Army units are moving, fast. Faster than planners believed possible, faster than German intelligence predicts. Eisenhower studies the updates in silence, the corners of his mouth tightening into something like relief. Patton wasn't exaggerating. He was under-promising. Still, the risks remain enormous. The roads Patton is charging down funnel through narrow valleys and wooded ridges, perfect terrain for ambush. German infantry, desperate and well-armed, lurk in the trees. Anti-tank guns are dragged into position by hand. Panzer units prowl, waiting for overextended spearheads. The first clashes come quickly. Outside the village of Martellange, American lead elements run into stiff resistance. Machine gun fire rips through the cold air, tracers slicing red lines between snow-laden trees. Tanks answer with thunder, shells detonating in showers of ice and splintered wood. Infantrymen move forward anyway, breath ragged, rifles slick with frost. This is not a clean, elegant advance. It's a brutal shove. Patton pushes them harder. When reports of resistance reach him, he doesn't ask for alternatives, he demands results. Attack, he says, again and again. Keep moving, don't stop. To some, it sounds merciless. To Patton, it's mercy of a different kind. Every delay costs lives. Those trapped in Bastogne, freezing and surrounded. The faster the Third Army breaks through, the fewer of them die alone in foxholes. Inside Bastogne, the men of the 101st Airborne have no idea how close help really is. They only know the shelling has intensified, German voices calling out surrender demands through loudspeakers. They know the snow keeps falling and rations are running low. They don't know that an entire army is bending reality to reach them.
Eisenhower watches the situation evolve with a mix of hope and dread. He has bet the campaign's survival on Patton's ability to do what no army doctrine recommends: pivot, advance, and attack in the worst conditions imaginable. And so far, Patton is delivering. But the hardest fighting is still ahead. Because between Third Army and Bastogne lies one final obstacle: a line of German defenses anchored around a small village that will decide whether Patton's confidence becomes legend or catastrophe. December 22, 1944, near the village of Assois, Belgium. The snow here is churned black and gray, mixed with oil, blood, and frozen earth. What was once a quiet crossroads is now a killing ground. Shell craters overlap like scars, steam rising from them as if the ground itself is breathing. The wind carries the smell of cordite and burning fuel, sharp enough to sting the eyes. This is where Patton's promise is about to be judged.
Eisenhower sits astride the last viable approach to Bastogne from the south. The Germans know it. They've dug in with everything they have left: panzer grenadiers in foxholes, anti-tank guns camouflaged behind hedgerows, artillery zeroed in on every open field. They don't need to win here forever. They only need to hold. American units approach cautiously at first, armor edging forward, infantry hugging ditches and tree lines. The first German rounds slam into Sherman tanks with deafening clangs, sending crews scrambling for cover. A tank burns, flames licking skyward, black smoke marking the advance like a funeral pyre. For a moment, momentum falters. Reports crackle over radios: heavy resistance, stalled elements, mounting casualties. Officers glance at watches, at maps, at the low gray sky that still refuses to clear. Time is slipping again, bleeding away in minutes measured by gunfire. Patton arrives forward, closer than any army commander is supposed to be. Snow dusts his helmet. His jaw is clenched. He studies the battlefield through binoculars, watching German fire walk methodically across American positions. This is the moment that separates planning from belief. He turns to his commanders. "We're going through," he says. "Not around, not later. Through." Orders ripple down the chain. Artillery batteries are dragged into position, guns sinking into frozen mud as crews hammer them level. Coordinates are shouted, calculations done with numb fingers. Then the barrage begins. The ground convulses. American shells crash down on Eisenhower in relentless waves, tearing apart defensive positions, shattering trees, burying men alive. The noise is overwhelming, a continuous roar that flattens thought and rattles teeth. Infantry press forward behind the fire, boots slipping, hearts pounding, shouting to be heard over the thunder. German resistance stiffens, then starts to fray. Panzer grenadiers fire until barrels glow, then fall back. Anti-tank crews abandon guns smashed by near misses. The carefully prepared defense begins to unravel under sheer violence and pressure. Patton has always believed in this: overwhelming force applied at a single point, without hesitation. By mid-afternoon, the village is burning. American tanks roll through shattered streets, crushing debris beneath their tracks. Infantry fan out, clearing buildings room by room. German holdouts fight desperately, but the line is breaking. The road north, toward Bastogne, is opening. At 4:45 p.m., a message crackles over the radio. Eisenhower secured. Patton closes his eyes for just a second. Then he exhales. The final push begins immediately. There is no pause to reorganize, no time to rest. Lead elements surge forward along the narrow road, engines roaring, men clinging to the backs of tanks, eyes scanning the tree line for movement. And then, through the falling snow, they see it. An American road sign,
Mud-splattered, crooked, barely standing. Bastogne, 2 kilometers. You can almost feel the surge of energy ripple through the column. Men cheer. Someone laughs, a sharp, almost hysterical sound. Radios light up as word spreads backward through the ranks. They're there. Inside Bastogne, the sound reaches them too. Not words, not messages, but a change in the rhythm of the war. German shelling slackens, artillery fire shifts south, then, unmistakably, the deep rumble of American tanks. At 5:26 p.m., elements of the 4th Armored Division punch through German lines and link up with the besieged garrison. Muddy, exhausted soldiers clasp hands in the snow. No speeches, no ceremonies.
Just relief. The siege is broken. When Eisenhower receives confirmation, he allows himself a rare moment of visible emotion. The gamble has paid off. Bastogne holds. The German timetable is shattered. The Ardennes offensive, designed to split the Allies and force a negotiated peace, is now bleeding strength it can't replace. And Eisenhower thinks back to that night in Verdun, to the cold bunker, to the simple sentence that cut through uncertainty like a blade. I can attack. Now he understands fully what it meant. It wasn't confidence. It was certainly born of preparation. But even as Bastogne breathes again, Eisenhower knows this is not the end. The Germans are still in the field, the winter's far from over, and the price of this victory, paid in frozen bodies and shattered villages, has only begun to be counted. The question now is not whether the Allies can survive, it's whether they can turn survival into domination. December 23, 1944, Supreme Headquarters, Versailles. The snow has finally stopped. Low clouds begin to thin, just enough for sunlight to break through in pale, fragile streaks. It's the first hint of clear weather in days, and with it comes a sound the Germans have learned to fear, the distant, growing drone of Allied aircraft engines. Inside the headquarters, Eisenhower stands by a window, hands clasped behind his back, staring out at the gray sky. Reports move across his desk in steady succession now, no longer frantic. Bastogne is supplied by air. The 101st is reinforced. 3rd Army is expanding the corridor, widening it meter by bloody meter. The crisis has passed its peak. But Eisenhower isn't celebrating. He's thinking about what almost happened. The Ardennes offensive wasn't just a military blow, it was a psychological one. The Germans had struck where Allied confidence was highest, in terrain labeled quiet, defended by green units and thin lines. They had counted on surprise, weather, and hesitation. What they hadn't counted on was a commander who planned for disaster instead of assuming stability. Eisenhower understands now that Patton's value wasn't just tactical brilliance or aggressive instinct. It was his refusal to be lulled by success. While others optimized for progress, Patton optimized for reversal. What if everything goes wrong? That mindset saved Bastogne, and perhaps more than that. As air support roars back to life, Thunderbolts and Mustangs tear into German columns trapped on narrow roads, their fuel trucks exposed, their retreat routes clogged. The offensive that once looked unstoppable begins to wither under relentless pressure. Eisenhower authorizes counterattacks across the Bulge. Montgomery's forces push south, Bradley's armies reassert their lines. What was a German breakthrough becomes a pocket, then a trap. Patton, never one to dwell on reflection, is already looking east again. He presses his commanders forward, reminding them that the enemy is weakest when retreating. His army, bloodied but confident, keeps moving. Yet for Eisenhower, the lesson of that sentence, "I can attack," lingers.
War, he realizes, is not decided solely by numbers or equipment,
but by readiness of mind, by leaders who don't wait for certainty before acting because they've already accounted for uncertainty in their plans. Years later, Eisenhower will speak carefully about Patton. He will acknowledge the flaws, the temper, the ego, the controversies, but privately, he will never forget December 1944, the moment when the war teetered and one commander's preparation turned collapse into momentum. You can draw a line from that frozen night in Verdun to the Rhine crossings, to the final drive into Germany, to the end of the war in Europe. It's not a straight line. It's jagged, violent, and paid for in lives. But it begins with a decision and a realization. As Eisenhower turns from the window, aides waiting for his next instructions, he is no longer reacting to the enemy's move. He is shaping the endgame. The initiative is back in Allied hands, and it will not be surrendered again.